So I recall once when I was living in the cemetery in Thailand for 10 days. It was a retreat for the monastics. It's supposed to be done out of repentance of breaching certain rules in the Vinaya. However, it has become a tradition in Thailand to still enter the penance retreat at least once a year to deepen our practice and to purify ourselves. So I remember I was chatting with a forest monk at that time. He was a nomadic forest monk, and I was very new into my monastic life, 4 to 5 months into my monkhood. So I was very fascinated with the idea of the forest dwellers. So it so happened that there were two Tudong monks, two Tanga monks. So on the final day after exiting a retreat, I approached one of them, and he was sharing things with me. So he taught me these two words in Thai, means ting sanya. Ting means discard or to throw away. And sanya, it means perception, which is the third aggregate. So in the five aggregates, we have form, which is the body, and then we have feelings, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These are the five things that constitute a human being. Without any of these things, you are not a complete human being. Whereas we recite, especially the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the discourse on the Buddha turning the wheel of Dharma, we mentioned that the attachment or the clinging onto the five khandhas, which is the five aggregates, is what results in suffering. When you take any of the five aggregates or the entire five aggregates as a whole, if you grasp onto it as a self or as a soul, then we are bound to suffer. Just like when you attach to the body. You attach to the body too much, you think about beautifying the body, you don't want to age, you don't want to fall sick, and you can be very paranoid about the body, then you're bound to suffer. When you attach so much, be it beauty or the fear of death or the fear of sickness, because we think that we are the body. So for people who think that they are the body, and they hold on to it so tightly, and they think the body belongs to them, when they fall sick or they have certain aches and pains, ailments, or they have certain allergies, when these things arise, you know it can actually destroy their day. They will feel, I'm not feeling well today, I'm not feeling good, my mind is not feeling good. They can get irritated, they might demand understanding from their loved ones who have witnessed that they have weak immunity. There's a lot of demands from them perhaps to be understood or to be empathized. But that itself is a sign of grasping onto the aggregate of form that can result in suffering. And in fact, sometimes even more illnesses will come. It can amplify the pain that you're already facing. So that is what the Buddha meant by to not attach to the five aggregates as yourself or belonging to you, belonging to a self. So I won't go into detail in all the five aggregates, but sanya is something very important because it's our perception. It's our perception of things that comes from our memories. And these can be seen also as limiting beliefs on certain things or even about ourselves. So in meditation, one thing we need to be very careful is not to allow new sanya or even old sanya to be created, because we will grasp onto them. So for example, you might have been a long-term meditator and then suddenly you can't sit well, you can't feel blissful, you feel that your meditation is flatline, you can't concentrate, you can't focus. Or maybe you're into generating loving kindness, metta, and you can't generate any metta today. You want to manifest, you can't manifest. And that is because you are afflicted by your own sanya, your own memory, your own perception of how things should be, of how meditation is. So it's very important for us to understand that even sanya itself is impermanent. It's subject to change, it's transient. And when you grasp onto it, you're treating it as a self. And self over here, it means that seeing it as a solid, independent entity. That is a construct that is fixed, but nothing is fixed in this world. So we need to learn how to ting sanya, means discard that sanya, to detach from it, to not grasp onto it so tightly. So earlier on, I talked about the body. So when you get in touch with the body, when your consciousness takes hold of the body, then sanya can come about. Oh, I'm someone who has allergies. I'm someone who falls sick all the time. I'm weak immunity. You see, the sanya comes in and it becomes a very bad sanya. And your Vedana, which is your feeling, the second aggregate comes about. An unpleasant feeling arises. right? And then it can trigger into an emotion, which is a mental formation. It could trigger fear of not being able to be healthy, right? And the entire consciousness wraps around it. So that is why sanya is something that's very important for us to learn to discard in order to look at things anew, and even for meditation to deepen, to get past to get past the current stage that we're in. So to understand the nature of mind is very, very crucial for us, very, very important. When we are attached onto this sanya, these perceptions, then we are restricting, we are limiting ourselves. Or when you look at life, some people, early on the Abbott talk about money. Some people, when you think about life, right, the sanya that's attached to life is money. And then the next sanya comes out, struggle. And then the formation arises, anxiety. You see, it's not that anxiety is there by default. It's that a thought comes about. A thought comes about life, work, or stress. See, very quickly, stress. But the work has not given you stress yet. Or maybe you're starting a new job and there's no stress yet. You don't even know what is it going to be. You only have a projection. It's your sanya as well. That comes from your perception of it, the memory of how things are like. And it could be the memory, it cannot even be your own memory. It could be the memory of others, meaning the stories of others. They say that, oh, this industry, this company is going to be stressful, this kind of boss, this kind of team is going to have some navigation issues for you. Then you're bringing people suffering into your mind and you develop that sanya. And then the mental formations of anxiety and stress comes about before you even started the job or before you even went for the meeting. And then as we know, when we are afflicted by these emotions, then we think about all kinds of wrong things and we lose a lot of energy unnecessarily. Emotion, things like anxiety, unless you're diagnosed with generalized anxiety and a bunch of stuff, they need an object of anxiety. If not, it can't exist on its own. So we need to be very, very mindful when we look at things, what sanya is developing out of it, what sanya is attached out with it, and sometimes we just cling onto it together. When we think about so many things, life in general is not stressful. It contains stress, it also contains happiness. We need to purify the way we look at things. Early on today, I was going down the MRT. I wanted to get home early. I just had a coaching session. And I get home early to play with my daughter. I'm a very law-abiding citizen, that if I'm not overtaking people on the escalator, I will stand on the left. And if I want to overtake, I will go on the right. And if there's people standing, I will say very loudly, please keep left, to sound like I'm someone working at the station. And then everyone just, Singaporeans like, please keep left. They just move to the left immediately, right? And then when they look back, I just keep quiet. And most of them don't even know it's me. So today I did the same thing because there was two people blocking the path. I was just walking down. I was like, please keep left. And then this man, he turned and he just looked at me and he smiled. Then I noticed my mind wants to go into frustration. It wanted to go in, but it was not going to frustration yet. So what happened over there? There's my perception, correct? My perception of how things should be like. You have to move to the left. And after I said it, you ought to move to the left instead of turning around to look at me and smile. Correct? So irritation was going to come out. I noticed it in my mind, moving very slowly. Okay, irritation is coming up soon. But for some reason, I don't know why, I just decided to smile back at him and look beyond him. Oh, there were some people, tourists with their heavy luggages over there. That's like, you see, I saved myself from a moment of unnecessary suffering. Pause before it jumps to the emotion. So it was just a thought. So I thought that this guy should move left. But if I was not mindful, then I would have just jumped straight into irritation. Why can't you keep left? Your luggage, can't you take the lift? Man, big luggages, like all these things can come out. So it made me think very deeply that, sometimes we do react very unnecessarily. It's just a thought that arises and we are not mindful that certain thoughts can create distress for us. Then we jump into it and then we suffer unnecessarily. Many things. Looking at life, work, coming up to the temple, maybe it's going to be hard, DK is going to be late, this kind of stuff. And then how do we respond to these thoughts? That's very important. Because the thought will arise first and followed by an emotion. If we can be very mindful to know that there are certain thoughts in our life, certain ideas in our life that can create a kind of emotion. And that's actually not the nature of reality. That's just the nature of our perceptions, our sanya, of how things should be like, or how things might be like. But the real thing is that we never know how things are going to turn out. We never ever know. So in tonight's meditation, I invite everyone to be mindful of sanya arising. Let's say when you sit and you have an expectation of how you ought to feel, that is a sanya. It's a perception that came from memory. Or it could be a perception from somewhere that you read, or you listen to talks of how meditation is like, how enlightenment is like. That is another sanya. And we see them as fixed, we're already grasping onto them. And that can result, that itself is suffering. It means the lack of peace, the lack of liberation, the lack of freedom, the lack of happiness. So we need to learn how to release it, to disengage, to detach from it. Every time we notice a form, just like the train passing by, for most of us, when you hear the train, it's just a train. We just let it be. We might not even register it. But for some beginners, or people very sensitive to sound, or a very strict expectation of meditation, when they hear the sound, they're like, sound. Oh yeah, why Abbott play news again at 9 p.m.? Right? Especially for those sitting at the end, near the door. Like, oh, Abbott watching news again. Monk should not watch news. Why can't he meditate? Shouldn't he know that we're meditating and disrupting us? You see, perception. Then you create so many thoughts, all different kind of mental formations. They start to flow out. 1 or 2 months ago, we talked about asawa, which is the outflow or inflow, the flux of our defilements that start to form. So we need to know that in meditation, because we are shutting away our senses, sitting still, this is where we can be more steadfast in our mindfulness to observe how the mind is moving when it gets in touch with a certain form, meaning a certain sense, because the body has senses. It gets in touch with sense. Just note, okay, this is consciousness arising. When you breathe, it's just tactile consciousness. Tactile consciousness, that's it. When you hear something, auditory consciousness. And when you think of something, mind consciousness arising. It is just form and consciousness. But it can have the absence of sanya, absence of perception. And not much mental formations coming up. Right? Because you know that they are transient, subject to pass, subject to change. They don't belong to a self. They're not a self on its own because they're subject to change. And then you don't attach, because if you attach to it, it can result in suffering. Even if you attach to a feeling of high or bliss in meditation, it is transient as well. And if you cling onto it so much, and then it ceases, the next thing is unhappiness, unblissfulness, right? And even unblissfulness itself is transient in nature. After unblissfulness, it comes bliss again. So when we register something in our consciousness because of the nature of having form, feelings are bound to arise. And there's only 3 types of feelings: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feelings. And that's it. It's not to say throw away your feelings. You can't reject feelings, but if they do arise, just, oh, okay, this is an unpleasant feeling. This is a pleasant feeling. And don't have so much thoughts or perception tied onto it. But what do we use if we don't use sanya? We use our panya, which is wisdom, to look at the 3 characteristics, which is non-self, impermanence, and suffering. Suffering meaning when you're attached to it, it can result in suffering. That's why we don't cling onto it. Just these 3 things, okay? impermanence, non-self, and suffering. Every time something arises, especially when a feeling comes about, we just want to note, okay, it's impermanent. This is using your wisdom to contemplate, not to reflect, but just to contemplate. And then we let it go. We don't cling onto it. We don't cling onto it. So remember, it's not about suppressing it or rejecting it. It's about non-clinging onto it. You have a pain in your body. Note, when you have a pain, what is this? Tactile consciousness arising from by nature of having form. And if you have pain, it's unpleasant, right? Then is there fear? That, if I sit too long, I don't adjust my posture, then my blood circulation can't flow. That is suffering already. Because you're attaching to everything in the five aggregates, basically. Form, feeling, perception, formations, and consciousness. Then learn to let it go. And after you've let it go, you can adjust your posture. Understand? Right?